Beware of time compression. Welcome to the companion video of my retrospective of Final Fantasy VIII. Unlike Final Fantasy VI and VII, I thought deserved a double-length retrospective, Final Fantasy VIII deserves a second alternative, spoiler-ridden look. Because whereas I thought in those games I could talk about the strengths and weaknesses in a fairly concise summary, I really can't do Final Fantasy VIII justice without explaining why the final half of the game is so rewarding without spoiling almost all of the plot twists that are dumped upon you at the midpoint of the game. So if you don't want the big twist of Final Fantasy VIII ruined for you, if you are prepared to have a sneak peek of what's going on in the second half of the adventure, then please stay and watch this very short companion time compression retrospective. The big twist of Final Fantasy VIII is that all of the companions of Squall and his adventure, with the exception of Rinoa, went to the same orphanage together. That all of them were looked after by the matron and her husband who ran the orphanage, who now, as they're grown up, the matron, Edea, is the sorceress who is attempting to take over the world, and her husband, Sid, is the headmaster of Balam Garden, the school that they've been attending, which has been breeding them for war. The entire point of SEED, the mercenary organisation, was to train people up to develop a combat force capable of fighting against the sorceress. Because the sorceress power is a curse. The moment that you are imbued with this magic, you're not born with it, you absorb it from another sorceress. When they pass on, they pass their magic to the next generation. You become vulnerable to the control of another sorceress in the future. Artemisia is well advertised as the main villain of this game, but you can't really explain exactly what it is and what she's doing without ruining all of the plot twists and exposition dumps that impact upon Squall and Rinoa. Edea is not a villain. Edea is actually a perfectly nice woman trying to do her best. She is possessed. For the first disc and most of the second disc of the game, you are not fighting against Edea, you are fighting against Artemisia, who is controlling Edea and using her to try and defeat and destroy SEED. None of this is explained to you. Squall doesn't understand it. You get drips, you get hints, you get threads. You get to meet the financier who paid for the construction of Balam Garden and fight against him without really understanding who he is and where he comes from. The side quest with the Shumi tribe, it's a really nice idea there, but it's just tedious and it's not well given to you. Once you understand, once they say to you, no, Squall deeply cares about Edea, she's an important woman, and it's not her fault that she dragged the world into chaos and war. Artemisia is the main villain, and we need to construct a way of fighting against her. But Edea didn't inherit her powers from the previous sorceress Adele. It is roughly explained to you that there was another sorceress several years ago, and in the previous war that Laguna, the man who you see through flashbacks and dream sequences and you inhabit, Laguna fought in the war with Galbadia against Esfar. You get these hints, and it is really smartly done to try and interest you in Laguna's story, because Laguna is closely tied to Squall and Rinoa and all of the characters, but he's been lost ever since that war ended, trapped in the continent of Estar. Edea did not inherit her powers from Adele. Adele is still alive. And the final part of this game involves the franchise fully embracing the science fiction ideals. It involves spaceships and flying to the moon, and Adele's prison where she's trapped in stasis orbiting the planet. It involves Squall and Rinoa taking a spacewalk, and then gasping as the oxygen in their spacesuits run out and they face death together. Linearity is one of the most discussed topics when it comes to rating Final Fantasy games, and Final Fantasy is truly linear in the way it bounces you from one mission to another. And in the second half of the game, you will encounter a point where Rinoa inherits the sorceress's curse. Which is why Rinoa isn't just the woman Squall loves, she's a liability. She's a danger to the entire planet. Rinoa is potentially your main enemy and threat in this game. But it can't tell you that in the first two discs. You've got to play 20 hours to introduce you to Squall without really understanding his backstory and why he's so emotionally cut off. There's some wonderful character building, the interplay between Squall, Questis, their teacher, Cypher, your main arch rival. It's good character work, but it's weak storytelling. It doesn't want to explain to you why you're going through the motions. It all ties together. It really could have done a little bit more work at the beginning to explain to you what this world is. It's a planet which is shrouded in a massive jamming signal that prevents the broadcast of radio waves across the planet. The first mission the training session, Galbadia's entire motives for starting the war was to reactivate a radio tower. If we understood just a little bit at the start of this game about what that meant, about why the planet was shrouded in this radio jamming signal, it would feed in so much understanding and so much emotional connection to where the storyline's going. Instead, it relies on character work, and it relies on you building up a connection to Squall and Rinoa and their personal story. It relies on that emotional connection without establishing what the stakes are until you're well past the halfway point of the game. And that's Final Fantasy VIII's deepest critical flaw. I do think the storyline here is fantastic, but it shows some weaknesses in the amount of patience it thinks the players will have and the amount of lore dump it needs to have to tell its storyline that are going to rear their heads again when we come to Final Fantasy XIII. But that is another story.